If you're trying to play over chord changes and you're sick of sounding like a dweeb, what you might want to get together are guide tones and shell voicings. They have a sound to them that's descriptive of the harmony and outlines the harmony without being too on the nose to where you sound like a nerd. So if you're moving through a progression like Autumn Leaves, you want to get away from this sound and get closer to this sound. So let's start with the classic definition of guide tones, which is not exactly how I define them. Guide tones are considered the thirds and sevenths of all the chords in the music. So if I take a look at a classic major 7 grip, C major 7, if I take out the fifth, I have what's called a shell voicing. Now let's define shell voicing. That means bass note and guide tone together, meaning root, third, 7. Now, where the third and 7 sit in the voicing is interchangeable. You can play with inversions of them, meaning this is a shell voicing, root 3, 7, or this, root 7, 3, or in the next octave. It doesn't matter what configuration of thirds and sevens you have in there. What you care about in a shell voicing is that the bass is in the bottom and that you have the third and the seventh of the chord. So if I take a look at the classic guide tones, what do I have? Well, since it's just thirds and sevens, you have to think about all the possible thirds and sevens you can have with a root, and since fives are not factored in, so all of your sharp 5 chords, flat 5 chords don't really make a dent in what the chords are. So here are the shell voicings I have. Major 7, root 7, 3, minor major 7, or diminished major 7, root 7, flat 3, minor 7, root, flat 7, flat 3, dominant 7, root, flat 7, 3. Those are all the options of the traditional guide tone lines. And with those, you can pretty much run through a real book and get through progressions. I'll show you. If I have Autumn Leaves, well, I have a minor 7 chord, going to a dominant chord, going to a major 7 chord, to another major 7 chord, to a minor 7 flat 5, which is the same shell as a minor 7 chord, to a dominant chord, to a minor 7 chord. We'll get through that in more detail later in the video, but just so you can hear the sound, that's just using normal guide tones. Now, I consider 6 chords also to be a part of the guide tone family, because in jazz music, oftentimes you're hearing the sound of, let's say, a major 6 chord that doesn't contain a major 7 in the voicing. And to me, you can really get that same kind of sound that you would get with a guide tone line with a 6 instead of a 7. So if I take a look at the C with a 6 and a 3, to me that's also a guide tone line. Also a C minor 6 is that with a minor 3rd. So once more, let's run through all the possibilities. Major 7, minor 7, minor 7, minor 6, dominant 7, major 6. Now, these structures, if I just take a look at the intervals on top, create these diagonal columns on the guitar. It's really important to see that. So on C, if I go back to my major 7 shape, I can just roll the notes, meaning like invert one of the notes at a time to just take a look at other places to play that guide tone line. So instead of these 2 notes, the 4th here, I can play a 5th here, because I'm just playing that E an octave down. That B an octave down looks like this. That E an octave down looks like this. The whole thing as a column looks like this. It's just 5th, 4th, 5th, 4th, 5th, 4th. It keeps inverting. Now, I don't really want to use anything not as a shell voicing. So the voices that start on the low E and low A string are kind of out of the game, but I do want to see these. Now, I can see the inverted column if I just take it up here. I have this 4th, this 5th, this 4th. It looks like this. All these, each pair, are guide tones of that C major 7. If I go back and put C roots on them, it looks like this. 1, 2, 3, and 4. They all give me the inside sound, the definition, the working bit of that C major 7, what people describe as the chord quality. So it's enough to describe the chord in some sense. And guide tone lines give you these hidden melodies that move inside chord changes. Cool. So let's take a look at some of these diagonal shapes that are created by guide tones. If I take a look at a minor 7, instead of this fourth, if I just drop it by a half step, ooh, that's the guide tone of a C minor 7. Why? Because major 7, major 3, flat 7, flat 3, just a half step apart. So it's basically the same thing, a half step down. Each one of these with a C root gives me bits of that C minor 7 sound. See that? Cool. How about minor 6 sounds? Well, minor 6 have a tritone in them right here. Tritones are special because they invert symmetrically. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I take a look at this tritone that goes with this C minor 6 right here, meaning E flat and A, it creates this diagonal. But because it's tritones, if I just start it on the low string from that E flat note, I have exactly the same shape. Only tritones do that on the guitar, right? Now I can put each pair of them on a C root and it gives me C minor 6 shell chords. Right, up here I have this one, and this one, and this one. I'm not playing the bottom two because they cross the bass note and kind of sound funky. Now, you can do it with dominant chords. Here's the tritone a half step up on the C chord, gives me this. All right. Now let's talk about the other ones that I have left over. I have the C6. This is the 5th into a 4th. These shapes, each pair, I have this one. Now, on their own, they don't sound like much, but at the moment when you start putting them to chord changes, they start sounding pretty cool. Like a 2-5-1, D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Now notice in that motion what happens. If it was classical music, the tritone inside the G7 would resolve this way. That's what's called tritone resolution in classical music. If I'm looking at it, the G7 has an F and a B. That B is the leading tone in the scale, meaning the 7th degree in C major, which is the 3rd of that G. And it likes to move in this kind of way. But in jazz, it likes to stay static and resolve into the guide tone of that C major 7. So that top voice, even though it's creating all that tension, is cruising. It's just sustaining. Only thing that's moving is that flat 7 of the G going to the 3rd of the C. So the guide tone line of a 2-5-1 is inverted, inverted again, if I play it up here, I can play it down, even though this crosses that G bass note. Take it up, D minor, G7, C major 7, and at the very top I have D minor 7, G7, and C major 7 right here. Now, this kind of motion, you don't have to just play it, even though it's a very safe thing to do when you're comping. You can play around it, and that's really the bigger point. So if I take a tune, like, it doesn't matter, a simple one, like Autumn Leaves or Blue Bossa or whatever with changes, what I really want to start seeing is a set of guide tones and how it's voice-led. So let's look at Autumn Leaves. The first chord has the flat 3 and the flat 7 of C. Now to get to F, the top voice moves down a whole step. Now I have the flat 7 and 3rd of F. To get that B flat major 7, the bottom voice moves down a whole step to the 3 of B flat. The top voice stays major 7 of B flat. Now to get the E flat, the top voice moves down a whole step, and I have 7 and 3 of E flat. To get the A minor 7 flat 5, the bottom voice goes down a whole step. To the flat 3 of A minor 7 flat 5, the top is flat 7. To get to D7, the top voice goes down a half step to the 3rd of the D7. And now to resolve to G minor, this voice goes down a half step, and this voice goes down a whole step. And I have the flat 3 and flat 7 of that G minor. But that gives me this. It's like a hidden melody that tells me something really profound about the harmony of Autumn Leaves without being overly arpeggio-y. If I'm playing around that, let's say I'm adding approach notes, just chromatic half steps from below. To me, that's something that is really, really essential in your jazz playing. If you combine that with arpeggios, then you're always hitting the parts that are driving the harmony forward. That forward harmonic motion is connecting the bits that are moving between the chords, and you can clearly see what stays static and what's moving. If I can connect that to my arpeggio vocabulary, then I get this. I can go like... Cool. So you can explore that all over the guitar. Now, the next thing you want to do is take a look at this harmonic concept of secondary dominants and take a look at the tritones inside those secondary dominants. This is a heavy concept, so pay attention now. What we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a 5-1 in the key of C. G7, moving to C. If I take a look at the tritone of the G, the F and the B, they help drive the story of the harmony to the tonic sound of the key, which is the 1 chord. The other tonic sound in the key of C is A minor. You guys know it as the relative minor. Now, the 5 of the minor in the key is E7. E7 is called 5 of 6. Now, E7 has 2 tritones as well, right? And those are G sharp and D, the 3rd and flatted 7th of that E. If I combine both sets of tritones, what do I get? Well, here are the tritones of G. Here are the tritones of E. Here's the inversion of those tritones of G. And here's the inversions of those tritones of E. It spells out 4 diminished chords. F diminished, G sharp diminished, B diminished, and D diminished. Now, you can use them interchangeably, meaning you can borrow the guide tones of the other secondary dominant that leads to the same quality of chord, meaning the same function of chord in the key. So if I take that G root and I take the tritone and resolve it, the tritone of the G, it sounds fine, sounds good. But if I take the tritone of the E7 and put G in the bass, it gives me the flat 2 and the 5th. So I have this kind of resolution that has more tension. This is the normal one, and this is the tense one. Hear that? That is cool shit, right? Or I can go Now I can do that with any of the secondary dominants, meaning the tritones of A7 and C7, the 5 of 2 and 5 of 4, are interchangeable because they both lead to subdominant chords. Now the tritones of 5 of 5 and 5 of 3 are interchangeable because 3 is that median chord and it has a dominant function. So if I take a look at D7 in the key of C, and I'm trying to take its tritone to lead me to G, that's cool, but I can also take the tritones of the B7 and put it on the bass note D. Check this out, it can go. That's a cool sound. Right, you hear that voice leading. So you can always play those kind of games with your harmony. It's super useful to be able to see it. Let's take another tune like Blue Bossa and just work on voice leading. C minor to F minor, to D half diminished, to G7, to C minor 7, E flat minor 7, A flat 7, D flat major 7, D half diminished, G7, C minor. They always exist in two places on each set of strings because they get inverted. So C minor 7, F minor. Now if I take the tritone of that D minor 7 flat 5, it just looks like a D minor 7. It's the same thing. Right? E flat minor, A flat 7, D flat major 7. I can tell a melodic story using the changes in the guide tones to really drive it forward from chord to chord. So it's not shreddy fast playing, but it's super descriptive of the changes. And that's what you want when you're starting out. You just want to have the ability to kind of swim from within the harmony and tell the story of the harmony without being too nerdy and too spelly about it. You don't want to just be very on the nose all the time. You want to tell the story in a more subtle way sometimes, and guide tones is the perfect tool for that. Cool. If you dig this, please leave a comment below for a chance to win a free month on our Patreon, which is the Mega Patreon, the best Patreon in the history of Patreon. So be sure to subscribe there, leave a comment, tell your friends, like, do all the things, and we'll see you next time.